She was just a simple nanny in the shadows of a mansion, until the day the billionaire's baby, born blind and restless, would not stop crying, and she did the impossible. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and comment where in the world you're watching from. Your support helps us share more of these powerful stories. The camera of words opens on a sprawling estate at the edge of the city. The mansion rises with white stone walls, tall glass windows, and perfectly trimmed hedges lining the circular driveway. But the inside tells a different story. Beyond the polished marble floors and chandeliers that sparkle like captured constellations, a heaviness lingers in the halls of silence, broken only by the fragile cries of a baby whose world is wrapped in darkness. Inside one of the upper rooms, the nursery is painted in muted creams and golds. Plush toys line the walls untouched. A mobile of silver stars hangs above a crib, but the child within does not reach for them. He cannot see them. He cannot be soothed by their shine. Enter Elena, the nanny. She is not glamorous, nor does she belong to this world of wealth. She was hired almost by accident, chosen after a long list of polished candidates failed to last more than a week. She wears simple clothing, a blue cotton dress, practical shoes, and her hair tied neatly at the back. But her presence in the mansion is steady, like a heartbeat in a house that often feels too cold. Elena begins her morning routine before sunrise. She carefully prepares a warm bottle, checks the baby's blanket, and hums under her breath. The child, Adrian, only a few months old, is restless from the moment she lifts him. His eyelids flutter, though they have never glimpsed the colors of the world. His tiny fists clench, and a cry sharp, unrelenting fills the air. Every day is the same. The billionaire father, Mr. Hawthorne, storms past the nursery door on his way to morning meetings, his polished shoes echoing down the marble corridors. He rarely glances inside. The baby's crying seems almost an inconvenience, a background noise to his empire. The household staff move quietly, keeping their distance. Some whisper that the child's blindness is a curse, others that the baby senses something deeper, an unrest no wealth can fix. But Elena does not whisper. She rocks the baby gently, speaking to him with patience no one else offers. Adrian's world is darkness, yet he recognizes Elena's voice like a beacon. She hums lullabies not from the radio or recorded machines, but from her own memory folk songs her grandmother once sang in a distant village. The melodies are simple, repetitive, full of warmth. At first, the baby still cries. But there are moments when the crying softens. His tiny head tilts toward her voice, and his fists unclench slightly. Elena notices these small details. She knows he is listening. She begins introducing patterns, the same song at feeding time, the same rhythm of tapping her fingers lightly on his back, the same gentle phrase repeated like a prayer. You are safe, little one. You are safe. Days pass, and though the baby still cries endlessly with others, he begins to show subtle signs of calm in her arms. The bond deepens quietly, unnoticed by the rest of the mansion. The official governess, Mrs. Davenport, is an older woman with decades of service in wealthy homes. She is rigid, efficient, and deeply frustrated by Adrian's ceaseless cries. She considers the nanny beneath her, a temporary caretaker with little refinement. Whenever Adrian is placed in Mrs. Davenport's arms, the cries escalate into screams, piercing and desperate. She grows irritated, bouncing him too firmly, whispering sharp commands that only make him wail louder. To her, the baby's blindness is a defect. She cannot manage a flaw in the perfect image the Hawthornes wish to present to society. It is in these moments that Elena steps forward. Without hesitation, she takes the baby back into her embrace. And within seconds, though the crying does not vanish, it softens to whimpers. His breathing steadies. His tiny hands grasp at her collar, as though anchoring himself. Mrs. Davenport scowls, muttering, "It's coincidence. Nothing more." But deep down, she knows it is not. Elena's bond with Adrian is not just duty, it becomes her calling. She studies him carefully, the way his breathing changes with different sounds, how he reacts to certain textures, the stillness that comes when she sings low notes near his ear. She begins creating small rituals to comfort him. She places a soft wool scarf in his crib, one she has worn often, so that her scent lingers when she cannot stay. She develops a rhythm of tapping gently on the crib rail, a signal that she is near even when he cannot see. Most importantly, she listens. When he cries, she does not rush to hush him. She waits, identifying the pitch and rhythm of his cries, learning to distinguish hunger, fear, and loneliness. It is not science, but intuition, born of patience and a rare tenderness. In a house obsessed with wealth and appearances, Elena treats Adrian as a person, not a problem. And though he cannot speak, though his cries still echo day and night, something inside him recognizes her as different. The household begins to notice. Staff whisper that the baby only quiets in Nanny's arms. The billionaire himself, though often absent, starts to frown at the reports. Pride blinds him. How can a woman of such ordinary background succeed where expensive doctors and high-class governesses have failed? At night, when the mansion's halls fall into silence, Elena stays awake by Adrian's crib. She watches over him as the city lights glow faintly through the curtains. His tiny breaths, his restless movements, become the rhythm of her life. And yet, in this fragile bond, a storm is waiting to break. For in the heart of every mansion lies not only wealth, but secrets, and soon the crying child will be used as a weapon in a conflict far greater than Elena ever imagined. The storm inside the mansion did not announce itself with thunder. It began quietly in the polished study of Mr. Hawthorne, where the billionaire sat surrounded by his obsessions. For him, wealth was not enough. Possessions had to mean something. His empire stretched across continents, but his truest pride was locked in glass cases and hidden drawers. Keys from every era, every empire. Heavy brass keys from ancient cathedrals, intricate silver keys from lost estates, even rusted skeleton keys no door could ever open again. He believed they symbolized power, the right to grant access or deny it. On his mahogany desk sat a velvet-lined case filled with his most prized pieces, a jeweled Renaissance key, rumored to have opened the treasury of a fallen duke. To him, these were not trinkets. They were proof of control. And control was something slipping through his hands more each day. One morning, panic rippled through the mansion. The jeweled Renaissance key had vanished from its case. Mr. Hawthorne's voice bellowed through the corridors, summoning staff with the fury of a man whose pride had been wounded. "Find it." His footsteps echoed like hammer strikes on the marble floors. Servants whispered in corners, guards searched closets and drawers, but the key was nowhere. Its absence hung in the air heavier than the chandeliers above them. And as suspicion grew, the quiet eyes of the household began to turn toward the simplest target, Elena. Mrs. Davenport was the first to plant the seed. Her voice, sharp as broken glass, rang in the halls. It was her. Who else? She has too much freedom around the nursery, too much pity from the child. She thinks that makes her untouchable. Her words spread like wildfire, feeding the insecurities of a household where wealth meant suspicion and status meant survival. The pristine marble, the air shifted from suspicion to certainty. Adrian, startled by the noise, began to cry, his wail piercing, raw. Elena clutched him instinctively, but the officers pulled her away. One of them snapped cold metal cuffs around her wrists. "You're under suspicion of theft," he said flatly, as though the word was already truth. The moment Adrian was taken from her arms, chaos erupted. His cry grew into a scream that echoed through every corridor. He thrashed in Mrs. Davenport's grasp, his tiny hands clawing at the air, his voice breaking into raw desperation. And then, in the middle of his sobs, came a phrase. Small, fragile, repeated again and again like a prayer. She didn't. She didn't. She didn't. The staff froze. Mrs. Davenport's face went pale. For weeks, the child had made only sounds of distress, but now his words were unmistakable. She didn't. She didn't. She didn't. The phrase rattled through the chandelier-lit hall, like the toll of a bell no one could unhear. But the police did not stop. They pulled Elena away as Adrian screamed, his voice breaking into hoarse repetition. The billionaire stood frozen, torn between fury at his loss and disbelief at what he had witnessed. His son, the son who could barely form sounds, was speaking. Not only speaking, but defending the woman accused. The image burned into every witness. Elena's wrists bound in iron. Adrian's cries splitting the silence. The words over and over. She didn't. She didn't. She didn't. The mansion had become a stage, and the story written across it was not about a stolen key. It was about trust, about a bond too deep for the powerful to understand. And though Elena was dragged away, the injustice had already carved itself into the heart of the mansion. After the police car carried her into the night, the house felt colder than stone. Staff whispered nervously, the governess paced with false composure, and the billionaire retreated to his study, slamming the door. But one sound would not leave them, the fragile repetition of the baby's words. She didn't. She didn't. She didn't. The phrase became a ghost, haunting their silence. Mrs. Davenport tried to dismiss it as coincidence. He mimicked her. That's all. But no one believed her. The image of Adrian reaching blindly into the air for Elena would not fade. In another part of the city, a man read the police report with quiet skepticism. Dr. Marcus Levin, a child psychologist known for observing what others overlooked, raised an eyebrow. A blind infant repeating such a phrase under distress was not coincidence, it was a message. And so, as Elena sat behind cold bars, her name already whispered in scandal across the city's elite, an unseen ally was preparing to look closer. Because somewhere in the marble corridors of that mansion, the truth was hidden in details no one cared to see, in the smallest patterns only a child and a patient heart could reveal. Night falls on the Hawthorne estate like a velvet curtain, but nothing sleeps. The chandelier bulbs are dimmed to embers, the marble carries back the faintest footfalls, and somewhere on the second floor a baby refuses the world's request to be quiet. Not crying, not the endless wail from before, but fussy, unsettled, whimpering as if searching the air for a familiar rhythm. Dr. Marcus Levin arrives without ceremony. No flashing lights, no entourage, just a worn leather briefcase, scuffed shoes, and the steady presence of someone who has stood in many rooms where truth was trying to be heard. Child psychologist, consultant to family courts when things turn ugly. A man who believes that attention is a form of love, and that attention when applied like light reveals dust in the beam. Mrs. Davenport meets him at the door with a tight "Our thinking. May I see the nursery?" She hesitates, then leads him up the grand staircase. The billionaire doesn't appear. Pride has locked him away with his collection. Inside the nursery, the world is creams and golds and quiet toys. The crib stands like a small ship in a pale sea. Adrian lies there half awake, his tiny face turning toward the faint sounds of fabric and breath. Has anyone comforted him? Levin asks. The child must learn to self-soothe, the governess answers, textbook proud and bone-weary. If you pick him up for every fuss. Levin moves closer to the crib and simply rests his hand on the rail. Tap, 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 tap. Soft, slow, measured. Adrian stills. The little fists loosen. You knew Elena used tapping. Mrs. Davenport demands. I didn't, he says, but he did. The baby turns his face toward the sound, and exhaled air whistles softly in his tiny throat, a fragile truce. Levin kneels to the child's level, listening with his whole face. "You remember, didn't you, Adrian? You remember the pattern." From the briefcase, he removes a small recorder, a roll of painter's tape, and a notebook. "I'll need an hour in here alone," he says. "And I'll need to walk the house, unaccompanied." Mrs. Davenport bristles. "That's highly irregular." "So is accusing a nanny because a key went missing," he replies, not unkind. "Irregularity isn't always error. Sometimes it's how we find the seam." She leaves with a huff that tries to be dignity. Levin starts where others don't, with the child. He plays a low tone from his phone, barely audible, and watches Adrian's breathing. No change. He tries a higher tone. A small frown. He plays a soft recording of ocean surf. Adrian's body loosens. By a degree, you feel more than see. He hums one note near the baby's ear, lower than any lullaby, and the child quiets more. He taps again on the rail. Tap, 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 a 3-in-1 pattern. Adrian's lips form the shape of a familiar phrase that life has taught him too early. She didn't. Levin writes 3-1. Then he taps the side of his own hand, matching the rhythm Elena used, and notices something subtle. At the end of the pattern, the baby reflexively turns his head left, always left, as if orienting to a sound he expects from that side. He moves the crib 2 inches and taps from the right. Adrian fusses. He returns to the left, and the fussing stops. He leaves a strip of painter's tape on the floor where the crib had been before he nudged it first breadcrumb. Levin walks the room, not touching anything yet. He crouches close to the baseboards. Fine dust outlines the width of furniture feet, but on the crib's front casters the dust is broken. Someone moved it recently. He looks under the crib and finds the edge of a wool scarf tucked like a secret Elena's. He doesn't remove it. He only notes its position precisely against the slat. He checks the baby monitor on the shelf. The power light glows, the camera eye is pointed toward the crib, but the lens cap is on a small, intentional blindness that mirrors the child's world. He snaps a photo with a timestamp, then opens the closet where spare linens live. Stacked neatly, save for the bottom sheet, a faint smear of polish along the edge, as if someone handled it with hands that weren't clean. Next, he kneels by the hatch of a floor heating vent beneath the window. The great screws show micro scratches, fresh, bright. He doesn't unscrew it yet. He listens first. "Something's wrong," he murmurs, half to Adrian, half to the room. The accusation doesn't close. He marks the vent with a small X of tape. Second breadcrumb. Levin requests access to Hawthorne's study. A security guard escorts him. Mrs. Davenport keeps a wary distance. The study is a museum of power, a wall of old maps, vitrines with keys like tooth. Who knew the case combination? Levin asks. "Mr. Hawthorne," the governess answers. "And myself for emergencies." "And the security team?" he asks the guard. "Sir, we have master access," the guard admits, stiff. "But every entry is logged." "Show me the logs," Levin says. Without Mr. Hawthorne's approval. Levin doesn't push. He traces dust with a finger along the edge of the glass case. A faint streak arcs to the side. Someone opened the case, then set something down, then closed it. On the desk corner sits a small felt pad, the kind placed under heavy objects to protect wood. Is slightly misaligned. When he lifts it, a tiny flake of blue paint sticks to its adhesive underside. He holds it up to the light. Blue, not the midnight lacquer of the case, nor the muted walls of the study. Is the blue of uniforms, of staff corridor doors, of the nursery's toy chest, if memory serves. He returns the pad exactly as found and writes without comment. The guard watches, uneasy. On the way out, Levin's shoe squeaks softly across the marble just outside the study. He stops, kneels, and sees what marble rarely shows, a faint scuff rubber meeting stone curving toward the service hallway. Not the thin staccato of a stiletto. A flat, practical sole. He follows the scuff to a corner where the polish looks different, hastily reapplied. He bends close. Embedded in the wax, a grain of gilt sawdust, minuscule, like gold dust. From a frame? From the chandelier maintenance box? From the nursery's gilded crib? Breadcrumb 3. The security room is a cooled cave of screens. Most are blank now in the quiet hours, looping between cameras. Levin remains gentle but firm. "I'm not here to catch a staff mistake," he says to the night supervisor. "I'm here to prevent a miscarriage of justice. If you help me, it helps the house." The man nods, reluctant but moved by the tone. He pulls logs. Camera 12, the east hallway toward the nursery, was offline for 20 minutes the morning the key vanished. "Scheduled maintenance?" Levin asks. The supervisor shakes his head. "No ticket. It was toggled at the wall panel." "And the nursery monitor?" Levin asks. The man scrolls. Camera feed live. But the lens cap would make it useless. In room check is the governess's job. Mrs. Davenport bristles again, the sound of a persona cracking. "I have many duties." "Of course," Levin says, non-judgmental. "We're mapping opportunity, not guilt." He requests hallway footage from camera 9, which faces the service corridor that connects kitchen to nursery. The time stamp shows a laundry cart stopping under a sconce. The cart pauses longer than a cart needs. A figure's shoulder dips, just out of frame, then the cart rolls on. When the cart passes, the sconce's small access panel sits just slightly ajar, visible only to someone looking for millimeters. "What's behind that?" he asks. "Wiring junction," the supervisor says. "And a few narrow chase paths for low-voltage line, like the nursery monitor and east sensors." Levin writes, "Chase path." He thanks the man and leaves. The pieces aren't wooden enough yet to feel like a puzzle, but they're starting to click. He returns to the nursery, where Adrian has finally drifted into a light, fretful doze. Levin sits on the floor, back to the wall, and speaks in a breath just loud enough for a child to borrow courage from the sound. "I heard you," he says. "You said it. She didn't. And I believe you." He doesn't touch the crib. Instead, he taps on the floor soft, subtle 3-1. A heartbeat and a promise. The child's body loosens again. There it is, a pattern as language. He draws a diagram in his notebook, crib orientation, rest in the glow of the crib lamp. In the dimness, another clue reveals itself, a thin tape line almost invisible across the floor just inside the nursery door, close to the skirting. It's not adhesive tape a cleaner would use. It's matte gaffer tape, low residue, the kind a stagehand uses to mark positions in a theater. What would you mark in a nursery? A spot to rest a cart will silently. A threshold line to measure exactly how far to roll something in without squeaking the casters. Or a boundary to realign the crib after moving it. He crouches and presses an ear near the taped line. The floorboard under that spot sounds hollow, a crawlspace gap beneath, common in old estates. The heating vent he marked earlier? It sits on the same joist line. "Chase path," he whispers again. When Levin asks Mrs. Davenport for access to the crawlspace, she refuses on principle, not law. "You are a psychologist, not a detective." "Children teach both professions," he says. "And tonight, the teacher is a baby who can't see, but noticed everything." She starts to retort, then stops when Mr. Hawthorne appears in the doorway. He has not slept. His tie is gone, his shirt open at the throat. The man who owns keys looks like a man locked out. Levin doesn't bow or apologize. He meets him as equals in grief. "Your son used words today," he says softly. "Is remarkable. It happened at the moment you pulled his anchor away." The billionaire swallows a complicated truth. "They say the nanny stole my key." "Do you say it?" Levin asks. Silence. Then Hawthorne gestures. "Proceed." The house manager produces plans, and with a small crew they open the heating grate carefully. The screw heads fall into a small dish with a bright, fresh ring, new tool marks. Levin slides a flexible inspection camera inside. the live image appears on a tablet. With beams, dust, a glint. He maneuvers the camera neck like a cautious snake. The glint resolves into a silver ring around the stem of a small key-like object lodged against a support. Not the jeweled Renaissance key, too small, but a blank. A practice key. Or a decoy. Someone seeded a trail, Levin says. Not to hide the key, but to prove the nursery was transit so they could point to the person who spends the most time here. Point to Elena, Mr. Hawthorne says, voice low. Levin nods, but the point is too neat. He withdraws the camera, and instead of reaching into the vent, he checks the grate itself. On the underside, he finds a faint smear of blue paint, not from walls, but from gloves. Not Elena's yellow cleaning gloves, a different blue, like maintenance nitrile. He holds up the grate to the light. You see? Whoever placed the decoy used blue gloves. Your nanny's gloves are yellow. And the closet linen had polish on it, as if someone tried to make their hands look clean when they weren't. Hawthorne exhales a sound that's not quite a word. Why would a thief go through this theater? Levin asks aloud, letting the answer arrive on its own. Because the true theft happened elsewhere, and this nursery was staged to frame the only person the baby would defend. He turns to the billionaire. We need access to the service corridor, Chase, the sconce panel, and your security logs without filter. And we need to talk to the one person who lingered where she never lingers, the governess. Mrs. Davenport stiffens. I have served this house for decades. And tonight you'll serve it by helping us test what's true, Levin says, voice level. Where were you minute by minute during the 20-minute blackout? She opens her mouth, but the sound of Adrian's soft tapping reaches all of them. Levin's fingers on the crib rail again. 3-1. The baby settles. The rhythm lands in the room like a verdict. He remembers. In the service corridor, Levin removes the sconce's small panel with a jeweler's screwdriver. Inside, wires are neat except for one bypass clip, a tiny device used to shunt power from one line to another. It's been recently installed, adhesive still tacky. The clip is wrapped in matte gaffer tape, the same kind marking the nursery floor. Who has access to parts like this? He asks the supervisor. Maintenance, the man answers. And security. Levin documents everything with photos and seals the parts in a fresh evidence bag, writing the time and his initials. He's not a cop, but he treats truth like a chain of custody anyway. They move next to the laundry alcove, where the cart paused. In the corner, behind a small bin, Levin finds a single-wheel chock wedge used to keep carts from rolling. Is lined with felt to prevent squeak on marble. He checks the felt edge and finds a bright flake of blue paint, twinned to the fleck from Hawthorne's study felt pad. The line begins to read, blue flecked felt in the study, blue felt on the wheel wedge, blue smears on the vent grate. Whoever moved through this house carried blue with them. Show me the maintenance roster for the last month, Levin says. The supervisor scrolls and points. A new subcontracted technician assigned to camera upgrades and minor electrical column price. Hired through a vendor the week before the theft. Background check, pending. Pending. Mr. Hawthorne snaps, anger flaring in place of shame. We put a stranger in my walls without clearance. Sir, you approve the vendor. Hawthorne's jaw flexes. A man can be brilliant in markets and blind at home. Levin returns once more to the nursery and, for the first time, picks Adrian up. He is careful, narrating every movement. Lifting. Turning left. There we are. He rests the baby against his chest, near his heartbeat. Your words mattered, he whispers. We're going to use them like a compass. He walks slowly around the room. At the closet, fuss. Not here. At the door tape line, the baby quiets. Here. At the vent, a quiet murmur. Here. He taps 3-1. The baby adopts the rhythm in his breath. a tiny chest rising and falling like a metronome of trust. Levin looks at Hawthorne over the child's head. Infants memorize through state and pattern. He encoded safety as a leftward orientation, a 3-to-1 rhythm, a scent on a scarf. Whoever staged this room moved the crib, blocked the camera, bypassed the corridor sensor, and tried to erase Elena's presence while exploiting it. But you cannot counterfeit Bond. It shows up in the smallest physics. Can you prove this? Hawthorne asks, voice rough. We're close, Levin says. Close enough that someone in this house will make a mistake before dawn. He lays Adrian back in the crib and taps the rail tap. Tap, tap. Tap then places Elena's wool scarf a finger's width from the child's cheek. The baby relaxes fully for the first time since she was taken. Levin turns to the room, to the house itself, and speaks the line that ushers us to the brink of revelation. Something is not right. The accusation doesn't add up. And when accusations don't add up, it's because the numbers were cooked. He looks from the vent to the sconce to the study door, 3 points, 1 pattern. 3-to-1. The rhythm that calms a child. The rhythm that will undo a lie. The mansion at midnight becomes a cathedral of smalls, sounds the sigh of vents, the whisper of fabric, the tick that lives inside old wood. Dr. Marcus Levin listens to all of it as if the house itself is a nervous witness. He waits by Adrian's crib until the infant's breaths settle into the rhythm. He is already marked on paper. 3-to-1. Tap, 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 tap. He doesn't touch the child again. He lets the pattern be the bridge between them. When he stands, the floorboard near the door whispers its hollow note, another tiny truth, in place, that prefers performances. Down the corridor, a murmur of adult voices swells and fades. The staff have been told to sleep, but sleep refuses them. No one says Elena's name out loud, but her absence occupies space, pulling cutlery, tilts, and curtain shadows a fraction, a person who became important without permission. Levin flips open his notebook and sketches a rough plan of the second floor. He doesn't draw walls. He draws flows where a cart could glide without squeak, where light from a chandelier washes a threshold, where a camera's dead zone kisses a service door. He inks a tiny metronome symbol over the nursery and writes, pattern equals language, then circles it. He moves like a caretaker through the sleeping mansion, but he takes the long way to everything. In the service corridor, he pauses by the sconce panel again. The adhesive on a bypass clip has grown a skin in the cool air, still new, still tacky, still impatient. He imagines a hand pressing it in place, a breath held, a glance toward the camera that would be blind for 20 minutes. Then the cart rolls. Then the case opens. Then a nursery is staged to accuse the only person the baby could defend. He does not write plot. He writes performance with props. The city jail has never learned the language of gentleness. It talks in steel and fluorescent hum. Elena sits on a bench that does not forgive and thinks of wool her scarf and whether Adrian will find it if she placed it just close enough to the edge of a world. She finds herself tapping knee to palm without deciding to. Soft, 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 soft. 3-to-1. She slows her breath until it learns the rhythm. Her cellmate is a woman with hands that tell a story of hard work and no applause. She watches the tapping and smiles like a person feeling rain after months of heat. What's the song? The woman asks. It's not a song, Elena says. It's a door. The woman nods as if doors and songs have always been the same. A guard passes and looks in with the detached boredom that protects the heart. He hears the tapping, sees nothing, moves on. Later, he will stand at the break room sink and find himself tapping the paper towel soft, 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 and not know why it slows his shoulders down. Elena gathers her palms together as if in prayer. You are safe, little one, she whispers to the air. It isn't magic. It is discipline, the decision to keep loving someone in the exact pattern they understand, even when that someone cannot answer. Back at the mansion, Hawthorne's study sits like a stage after a show. chairs too precise, glass too smug. Levin asks permission with a nod. The billionaire's jaw flashes the outline of a man who learned to control things because something once controlled him, but he steps aside and lets the specialist be a specialist. Levin doesn't put on gloves. He already intends to touch as little as possible. He leans into the case and inhales. Vitrines smell like old linen and formaldehyde. But there is a trace of something else here, metal polish, citrus cold. He kneels until his eyes meet the desk surface at horizon level. A faint oval of dullness kisses the mahogany where the velvet case always rests, but to the right of it a smaller oval new, shallow, polished by something heavy enough to leave a bloom, but careful enough to lift again quickly. He does not say coaster. He writes, temporary landing. On the credenza rests a small bottle of mineral spirits with a cloth stuffed in its mouth. Who used that, he asks. The security supervisor fidgets. Housekeeping wiped residue on the case after the police dusted for prints. Any blue, Levin asks, on the cloth. The supervisor looks like a man who has never been asked to color check a rag in the middle of the night. He fetches a bag with the cloth, and under the study's lamp the fibers glint faintly. Not navy, not midnight. Cerulean, the precise bruise of cheap factory paint. Levin smiles at the cloth as if meeting an old friend. Our guest walked through the house, leaving crumbs of sky. Hawthorne's eyes are a mix of curiosity and grief. You think I hired the person who framed her. I think you hired a company, invisible then vetted. Hawthorne tastes shame and replaces it with action. I'll wake my assistant. We'll pull the vendor file. Not yet, Levin says, and it isn't disrespect, it's choreography. If you shake the tree too soon, the fruit runs. He goes to the kitchen, next to sensory library that keeps its own logs. The chef, Levin, is up, pretending to inventory the herb fridge. In truth, she is a person who cannot sleep when something unkind has been done to a decent worker. Did you smell metal polish today, where it didn't belong? Levin asks. She thinks in scent memory. By the laundry pass-through, she says finally. A little cloud of it around 10 a.m. Not normal. We never polish near linens. Who was in the pass-through then? She lists names the ones who inhabit mornings. A maid with a quiet laugh, a junior butler who says yes too many times, Mrs. Davenport checking standards, a maintenance contractor with a toolbox the color of a summer sky, wheels scuffing, a cart wedged like a doorstop lined in felt. His gloves. Levin asks. Blue, she says. Not like our yellow. Powder blue. And he moved like a person who likes the noise he isn't making. Levin writes that exactly. Likes the noise he isn't making. A thief's odd joy is the silence he carves. He returns to the nursery to examine the monitor again. He removes the lens cap and cradles it. The cap itself matters. It bears micro-scratches around its rim as if someone pulled it on and off with speed several times recently, testing. He holds the cap at an angle to the crib lamp and sees along its edge a whisper line of adhesive. Not from a manufacturer. From tape the matte kind that doesn't reflect. Gaffer. He looks at the closet shelf where backup caps live. The spares are crisp and used. He lifts the one from the monitor and aligns its scratch pattern over a strip of gaffer tape in his pocket, mapping made-up constellations. The arc matches the pressure someone used to pop it off in a hurry. He sets the cap down and whispers toward the crib without turning his head. They made your world blind on purpose, little one. But we can make it see. He re-angles the camera toward the door and flips its IR lamp to always on, even in light. The lens catches dust moves like a galaxy. That's what he wants, motion starfields. He clicks record. From his briefcase, he pulls a pocket decibel meter and a small microphone that looks like a bead. He tapes the mic under the nursery doorknob with a sliver of gaffer. The irony isn't lost on him. Down the hall, he places a second mic inside the sconce cavity, pressed into shadow beside the bypass clip. He fixes a third near the study threshold. He claps once to sync the mics. The baby stirs. He taps 3 to 1 on the rail. The baby returns to trust. Then, with the patience of a watchmaker, Levin performs a noise walk. He pushes an empty laundry cart slowly down the service corridor. The wheels squeak at one specific millisecond exactly at the threshold line he had found on the nursery floor. He wedges the cart using the felt wheel chock retrieved from behind the bin. Silence replaces friction. His decibel meter dips. He continues. The cart passes the sconce. A click from inside the cavity, the bypass relay settling from the heat of the room. He logs its timestamp. In the study, he opens Hawthorne's case without touching its velvet. He opens it by pressing the edge with the felt face of his pen cap. The hinge sighs a small metal complaint that the mic hears, and he cannot. He closes it. Back to the nursery. He moves the crib 2 inches left and right and notes how the casters sing different notes on the wood, like a low xylophone. He doesn't need the mics to feel the melody of a crime, but he needs them to play it back for those who prefer proof to pattern. By 2 a.m., he has a list of questions that behave like adjustable glass. Who benefits from Elena's absence besides the person who actually stole the key? Who speaks house well enough to stage sensors, vents, and carts? Who had permission to be invisible for 20 minutes? Who has the kind of ego that prefers a frame to simple pocketing of valuables? He goes to Mrs. Davenport's small office, a monk's cell for a person who believes rules are religion. He studies the shelf of manuals with their unbent spines. A spiral notebook sits open, its last page a list labeled Thursday. Beneath silver inventory audit and guest towels reorder, a hurried scrawl, lens caps nursery privacy. There is a purchase order number. Why would you order lens caps for privacy in a nursery? He asks when she appears in the doorway, drawn by the gravity of a man reading her notes. Parents may be uncomfortable, she says quickly. We value discretion. But you left the lens cap during a theft investigation. I have many duties. It is the second time she has used that shield. Shields reveal as much as they block. Levin takes a photo of the PO number with his phone and thanks her as if she has done him a kindness. As she turns to leave, he watches the way her hand touches the doorframe, 2 fingers pressed to the wood like a pianist finding middle C. It is the touch of someone who lives by alignment. In the pantry, a junior maid named Anna confesses in a whisper. Mrs. Davenport told me to cap the camera during naps, she says. Said the family wanted no recordings of sensitive moments. Anna's eyes plead to be told this doesn't make her a villain. Levin assures her it doesn't. The head of maintenance, not the subcontractor, tells Levin that the vendor's rep dropped off a toolbox on Monday and collected it today. He said he was swapping kits, the man says. Box was light when he picked it up. Light like it lost its tools. And heavy when he brought it. Levin asks. Moderate, the man says. Enough to sound like metal shifting. Blue paint on the box. Levin asks, already knowing. The man nods. In the morning room, the junior butler admits that Mrs. Davenport changed the baby's crib position last week because the sight line offended the symmetry. Levin writes symmetry and underlines it twice. There are people who will move a child for a line. Back in the cell, Elena dreams in tactile images. A wool edge. A warm bottle. The weight of a tiny head settling in the space between collarbone and story. She jerks awake at the phantom sound of a cry that isn't there and finds the guard from earlier standing at the bars, uncomfortable with his own voice. Do you need a blanket? He asks, and when he hands it through, he says without looking at her, my son had colic. We put on a metronome app. It helped. You were tapping. It's how he knows I'm near, she says. The guard nods at a universe only 2 people share. I'll see if they'll let you call someone at the house for an update, he says, violating no rule, but bending a culture. He returns with a phone that has seen too many quiet tragedies and refuses to let them be this one. Elena does not ask for a lawyer. She asks if the baby slept. The guard returns with nothing and everything. A doctor is with him, he says. A good one. Then the house has a chance, Elena whispers. At 3 a.m., Levin asks Hawthorne for the impossible. 10 minutes alone in the study with everything positioned as it was, plus the cart, the chalk, the sconce panel half open, the monitor lens capped. I want the house to perform what it was trained to do, he says. Hawthorne grants it, perhaps because giving permission is the one thing he can control. Levin starts in the service corridor, at the sconce. He clicks the bypass so camera 12 will see nothing for exactly 20 minutes. He rolls the cart, wedges it with the felt block under the sconce, then walks empty-handed to the study. He presses the felted pen cap to the vitrine latch and opens it without leaving a skin oil arc. He does not take anything. He lifts the pad on the desk, the one with the blue. Fleck and rests a blank metal key from his briefcase on it to simulate weight. He closes the case, pockets the blank, not the Renaissance key, and walks back to the cart. He uncaps the nursery monitor, moves the crib 2 inches left, slides his hand under the vent grate to smudge blue on the underside using a spare glove he picked from a maintenance room. He caps the camera again, returns the crib, tucks the scarf back where it was. He removes the wheel wedge, rolls the cart away, and flips the sconce panel shut. He returns to the study and gestures for the security supervisor to play back the mics. The house sings its song. The click of the sconce relay, the felted sigh of the vitrine hinge, the rubber hush of wheels stopping at precisely the tape line, the soft chime of screws a second before contact. He aligns the timestamps. 20 minutes is generous, he says. You can perform the staging in 9. That means the thief planned a safety window. Why? Hawthorne asks. So if anyone stumbled into the corridor, Levin replies, it would look like maintenance. And if a single person noticed anything amiss, they'd point to the nursery, not the study. Because the nursery has a story that explains a camera cap, Hawthorne says, beginning to see the narrative mechanics in his own house. Levin nods. The thief doesn't need to hide in darkness if he can write in it. Hawthorne's assistant, woken by a text that sounded like a summons, appears in soft shoes, clutching a laptop. She pulls the vendor file. The subcontracted tech column price uses a Gmail address and a phone number that forwards to voicemail. We sign subcontracts only after background clears, she says, eyes wide at finding the pending flag she missed. The vendor guaranteed he was clean. You'll call the vendor at dawn, Levin says. Not now. Why not? Hawthorne asks, always an empire builder for whom action is oxygen. Because people who like noise they aren't making also like to come back and admire it, Levin says. He'll return to adjust, retrieve, or taunt. Or someone working with him will someone who needs Elena gone just as much as he does. Hawthorne stares at the closed study case as if it has opinions. Who needs her gone? He asks quietly. Levin doesn't answer. He writes motive house pride, motive outside theft, and draws a thin bridge between them. Two people can share a project while telling themselves different stories. At 3:40 a.m., Levin finds Mrs. Davenport in the linen room, smoothing edges on stacks that don't require smoothing. He doesn't accuse. He inquires like a man asking about the weather and meaning grief. You ordered lens caps for privacy, he says. A kind gesture if a family asked. Did they? She keeps smoothing. In matters of image, we anticipate needs. You also moved the crib for symmetry, he says. The room demanded it. If the room demanded you move a mountain, would you? He asks gently. She stops smoothing. This house used to have standards, she says, and the past tense rings. What did Elena break besides a camera's line, he asks. She breaks habit, Mrs. Davenport says, and now she is looking at him, eyes pale and sharp. She sings folk songs in a mansion. She smells like wool instead of new leather. She holds that child constantly. It will make him weak. It made him speak, Levin says, and it made the house remember what tenderness sounds like. She flinches in the way people do when an inconvenient truth hands them a mirror. You think I stole a key, she says. I think you let your anger toward a new language make you a poor listener, Levin says. But I do not think you pulled a Renaissance key from a billionaire's case. I think you were used because you are predictable and because you love a straight line. The governess sits down on a stool as if her knees have suddenly chosen honesty. I saw the contractor remove a panel last week, she says. He said he was fixing a draft. Around the sconce, he smelled like cold metal and glue. Did you report it? I logged it, she says defensively, and points me to a clipboard where, indeed, a line item reads, Sconce panel east corridor inspected by vendor. Thank you, Levin says, meaning it. That helps. Mrs. Davenport exhales. The nanny did not take the key, she says, the always needed sentence finally given to the air. The child said it. Why do you people not listen to babies? We are listening now, Levin says. They set a watch without calling it that. Levin and the security supervisor take seats in shadows of the service corridor, where the camera will catch their backs if anyone reviews later, but not their eyes. The billionaire stands in his study, like a man guarding a reliquary, which he is. Mrs. Davenport stations herself near the nursery, as if proximity can be penance. The chef leaves a pot of coffee on a warmer and says nothing about the hour, because hospitality knows grief by many clocks. The mics continue to whisper to a recorder that blinks its little red faith. Adrian sleeps in fits, but when he stirs, Mrs. Davenport Chasen taps the rail once and then waits for Levin, who returns and taps 3-1 and watches the baby choose calm again. At 4:12 a.m., the service door whispers open. The corridor breathes a draft that knows this trespass well. A figure enters in dark maintenance fatigues, a cap pulled low, a mask as if dust ever lived so clean here. In one hand, a small tool roll the color of a summer sky. In the other, a cloth. He moves like a person who has practiced moving as nobody. Levin stays still. The man kneels at the sconce panel and removes it with a practiced twist. He reaches in, not to install, but to retrieve his fingers' feel for the bypass clip. He tugs, and the adhesive protests softly. He wraps it in the cloth. He looks down the corridor, then up, then satisfied turns to the laundry alcove where the felt wheel wedge would have been if Levin hadn't collected it. A small flicker of annoyance in his shoulders. He improvises. He uses a gloved hand under a wheel to dampen the cart's squeak. As he rolls toward the nursery, he pauses at the taped floor line, exactly as before. He peeks into the nursery. The monitor's IR lamp catches the dust like galaxies again, and the man, if we can call him that when he insists on being function, caps the camera with a new lens cap pulled from his pocket. He steps in, moves to the vent swiftly, and reaches under the grate without removing screws. He is searching for the decoy he left. When he doesn't find it, he frowns. He glances at the crib and freezes. Mrs. Davenport has stepped into view, not according to plan. She is not symmetrical in fear. She is human. The man straightens. Housekeeping, he says, voice pitched into a cheerful blank. Early call. Had a maintenance ticket. Not at 4 in the morning, Mrs. Davenport says, and to her credit, there is iron in it. Levin steps from shadow without hurry, carrying the felted wheel wedge in his palm as if it were a chess knight. Looking for this. The man computes exit routes with a small eye flick. He chooses forward through the nursery, brush past the governess, sprint the short hall to the servants' stair. He moves. Levin does not chase with legs, he chases with sound. "Now," he says softly into his lapel mic to the security supervisor down the stairs. A door alarm doesn't blare, that would wake the house. Instead, a magnet kisses a plate and holds. The stairwell door refuses its role as escape. The man pivots. He runs for the study, perhaps to grab the real prize if he cannot leave with tools. Hawthorne fills the doorway with a shape made of every boardroom he has ever owned. A guard steps to his side. The man stops, trapped between keys and the child he tried to use as cover. He lifts his hands in a pantomime of surrender, then drops them and pivots again for the window at the end of the gallery, an old sash with. Thick glass that would argue even with a storm. He is fast, but the house is finally on the side of itself. A rug edge catches his shoe. He stumbles and slaps a palm on the wall to steady himself. When he pulls his hand away, it leaves a blue smear, the same cheap cerulean, bright against cream paint. Cameras that were supposed to be blind watch. They take him to the small anteroom off the study. No beatings. No raised voices, just light and silence, and a specialist who knows that most lies want to be held before they dissolve. "Name?" the supervisor asks. "Callum Price," he says, offering the vendor story. When Levin lays a printed roster from the vendor on the table, the one Hawthorne's assistant found in the file room, Callum Price, is in neat black letters. But the photograph beside the name is not this man. The real Callum has a scar like a comma by his lip and kind eyes. This man has neither. "Who are you when you're not wearing a borrowed name?" Levin asks, unruffled. The man considers playing silent. Then he shrugs. "You won't find me," he says. "I have the kind of face that dresses itself for the day." He taps the blue tool roll. "You're making a fuss over baubles." Hawthorne's mouth tightens. "That bauble paid for a hospital wing." "Then perhaps you could have kept an eye on it," the man says, and there it is, the thievery that is not about metal but humiliation. "Why the nursery?" Levin asks. "Why a baby's room is your stage?" The man smiles without warmth. "Because people with money hate mess near innocence," he says. "Frame the one who holds the baby, and the house cleans itself of her. Then you work in peace." "Alone?" Levin asks. He flicks his gaze toward Mrs. Davenport, not accusing, but reminding the room that predictions can be harvested by opportunists. The man's eyes slide to the governess, enough to say he noticed her tendencies, not enough to say she opened a door. "Some houses come pre-rigged," he says. "They police themselves. All I did was compose." Levin places the bypass clip, the gaffer tape, a blue-smeared great scrub, and a felt wheel wedge on the table in a neat line. He taps the 4 objects softly. 3-to-1. 3 corridor props and 1 study prop. The thief's face finally cracks a millimeter, not in fear, but in the professional appreciation of someone whose work has been seen. "Where is the Renaissance key?" Hawthorne asks, voice carefully held inside his ribs. "In circulation," the man says, enjoying the word. "For a price." "Name the buyer," the supervisor says. The man yawns. "I prefer a lawyer." He will get one. This is not that kind of story. But the request is a delay tactic, and Levin is not interested in winning tonight's argument. He is interested in opening the house enough that tomorrow happens honestly. They step back into the nursery as dawn teases the horizon, turning the chandeliers gold to a gentler amber. Adrian wakes gently for once. He doesn't scream. He searches with his face for a known geometry. Levin moves to the crib and taps the rail tap, 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 tap. The baby releases a sound that is not quite a laugh, but lives in the same neighborhood. Mrs. Davenport stands at the foot of the crib with hands she doesn't know how to hold. She wants to touch the child, but does not trust her passport to tenderness. Levin tilts his head toward the rail. Once, he says. She taps once and waits. The baby does not panic. She breathes as if a room grew lungs. Hawthorne appears in the doorway, a man who has not slept and has finally learned why. He sees the tiny truce and lets it sign him, for a breath, back into fatherhood. Call the station, he tells the supervisor. We have evidence. We have the wrong person in custody. And the right one, the supervisor asks. The right one is in a chair waiting for his lawyer, Hawthorne says. But the first right thing is a call. He looks at the child, and something in his face surrenders to something that won't be. Managed. Bring her home, he says, and the house, enormous and proud, feels for 1 second like a place meant for humans again. Levin lingers alone after the others disperse to their tasks. He stares up at the nursery's coffered ceiling, where the slight misalignment in the panel seems marks the joist line he traced earlier. He taps the soffit softly, 3-1. The room answers by not fighting him. He smiles and writes, when truth is near, Wood agrees. He takes the recorder from under the doorknob, the mic from the sconce, the mic by the study threshold. He labels each file in a script only he needs to understand. He leaves the IR camera live. He folds Elena's scarf still near the crib into a looser square so more of its scent finds the air. He doesn't think of it as an amulet. He thinks of it as a bridge that costs nothing to keep open. He picks up his notebook, adds one more line under the page, where 3-1 is circled 3 times. A baby told us the rhythm. We only had to move our feet. As the sky lightens, the mansion seems to exhale. Dawn turns the marbles cold into pearl. The staff stop whispering because whispering is a night habit, and day asks for honest volume. Mrs. Davenport writes a note in her ledger that does not exist on any standard template. When he stirs, tap once and wait for Dr. Levin. Do not adjust crib placement unless instructed. The act of writing it makes something in her hands quieter. Chef Lien brews coffee that tastes like apology without words. The junior butler straightens a painting that does not need straightening, and then sits, unmoored, realizing he is not paid to understand but has, nevertheless, begun to. The security supervisor prints the logs this time with the times aligned, a courtesy to the future that will review them. Hawthorne, alone in his study for the first time, without pretense, touches the velvet case not as a symbol but as a box that houses a mistake he will not make again. He picks up a key from a lesser collection, an iron one, without gemstones, its bow plain as a barn, and closes his hand around it until metal warms to palm temperature. He dials the precinct. The guard from a night shift walks to Elena's cell with a softness the corridor pretends it cannot hear. He fumbles the keys, annoyed at himself for feeling. You're being released, he says, and it sounds too big in a place designed to shrink. Elena stands too fast, and the room tilts then writes. The baby, she asks. You are the child, the guard says, adopting formality, and losing it at once, is with a doctor who likes him. And the house learns something overnight. She steps into the hall, and the fluorescent hum continues to be what it is. But there is a smell from outside of morning pastries somewhere, of car exhaust, of a world that insists. Her hands twitch to the old pattern soft, 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 and she folds them together to keep from crying, because crying would be a kind of relief she hasn't earned yet. When she reaches the desk to sign the paper that says she was here and now isn't, the pencil in the clerk's hand ticks 3-1 without its owner knowing. It's how patterns travel, not magically, but by being useful. The car rolls through the gates, and the hedges look like a ritual that pretended it was nature. Elena steps out, smaller than the mansion, larger than its pride. Mrs. Davenport waits by the door, not to block, but to greet in a grammar she is still learning. She says nothing first, and that is the right choice. Apologies should not be forced. Levin meets Elena in the foyer. He does not hug her, He is not in her life that way. But he nods with a respect that feels like scaffolding. He slept in pieces, he says. He is ready for the rest. Elena walks without hurry to the nursery. Hawthorne squints privately at how both terror and relief can fit inside a man's face the exact moment before he stops deciding, which is to say, before he allows himself to be simply Adrian's father. In the doorway, Elena pauses not for drama, but because a person should ask a room for permission before changing it. Then she crosses the threshold, moves to the crib, and waits. Not a sound from her yet. Adrian senses the shift anyway. Babies read gravity. He turns his head left, the direction where memory lives. Elena taps the rail 3-1 soft. The infant releases the little breath that carries a house into forgiveness. She lifts him, narrating every inch, lifting. Turning left. Here we are. His ear finds the wool place between collarbone and story. His hands, once fists, flatten into small open palms against her shoulder, that ancient sign from infants who approve of gravity's plan. No one claps. No one says, "I told you so." The chandelier light doesn't need to be golden to be warm, but it is. Levin watches with the working contentment of a person who knows his job is not to be the savior, but to remove what prevents goodness from doing its own work. Hawthorne clears his throat, and when he speaks, the sentence is not grand but correct. "Elena," he says almost to the floor, "I am sorry." She nods, not as absolution, but as acknowledgement that a man tried to join the human race before breakfast. Later, Levin says, "I will ask you to tell me the exact order of your rituals with him. We will turn them into a protocol the staff can honor when you sleep. But for now, be as you were." Elena hums a folk song that sounds like a path along a hillside where stones know the souls that walk them. The house stands very still, like a body trying not to interrupt a heartbeat. As the morning assembles itself into tasks, Levin returns to the service corridor one last time. The sconce panel sits open from the night's performance. He looks again into the cavity and sees, on its inner lip, a fragment he somehow missed, a paper thread stuck in adhesive. He teases it free with tweezers. It isn't paper, it's fiber from a cloth tag micro-printed with a washed-out logo. He takes it to the study lamp and magnifies it with a lens from his kit. The logo is a generic laundry supply brand, but the serial numbers on the tag are hotel stock, not residential. The thief's cloth used to wrap the bypass and pick up evidence came from a hotel laundry, a place where carts roll like trains and gaffer tape lives in utility drawers, a place that rents staffed mansions for deep cleans and looks innocent on an invoice. He will give this to the police with the calm of a person who now has vector and venue ***. The investigation can widen where it needs to. The story he is holding needs to narrow toward the public turn that will clean a name.